and Ben.
Absolutely, they've been brilliant. For us, it's so surreal, you know, speaking to you, speaking to Maisie, Ben, speaking to Lou Macari. You know, we're going back all that
Way
time.
back,
Lou was so kind, took out the time. You know, it's still football is still. I don't want to say young in this country, but it doesn't kind of get the recognition that it deserves being a world game. You know, this is a cricket obsessed country. It's
I know
cricket. So for a lot of, but we have a lot of passionate followers, especially United fans across the country, and you know,
do you have many supporters clubs?
No, actually, we're the only ones from Manchester, the official one. I know a few other clubs. Yeah, a few other clubs have them. The man you see, Ismaeel, you know, he told me 6 years ago he's going to make an official club. I didn't believe him. He did it. United told him they need 50 members. We have about 100 plus paid up members for 6 plus years now. We got a letter from Louis van Gaal. So we're an official supporters club.
So how often would you go over to England?
So it's funny. Most of us who've been have been because either like myself, we live there or we grew up there, or it's very difficult to get visas for people.
Yeah.
It's very expensive. It can run you the thousands of pounds to get a ticket. That's if you have a visa plus hotel stay and all. But I know groups of people who have still managed even with all those difficulties. And out here we have screenings. Ismaeel does screenings, and I've had people drive 4 hours to come watch us lose 1-0 to Burnley at home, and then sing the whole way and drive back. You know, the fans out here are as obsessive and as loyal as you'll find anywhere. It's and you know, we've sort of had the club since after Sir Alex retired, so it's been an interesting time. But
you've had the slippery slope time.
Yeah. But you know, we've had a few finals. We've had a Europa League, an FA Cup to celebrate. So we've just tried to make the most of it.
Yeah, it'd be strange this year if they get the FA Cup final and no fans there.
Yeah, it would be. But I think at the moment we'll just take it if we can. It'll be great to have it. So Keith, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for taking the time out for us. It really means a lot. If I can start by asking you, I know you came to Belfast. That's where you were scouted to play for Manchester United. Were there other clubs in the picture at the time, or was United's interest the only thing that mattered to you?
Well, I went to actual Glasgow Rangers. Graham Souness was the manager there, and they were interested in signing me. But I went there, but the following week I went on trial as a 13-year-old to Man United, and I was a Man United fan. So I was there for a week and done my training and what have you, played in matches. And I thought I did okay, nothing spectacular. And what happens at the end of a week of a trial, you get called into the manager's office. And as I say, I didn't think I did too great, but fortunately, you know, they wanted to sign me straight away on a schoolboy form with a guaranteed apprenticeship when I hit 16. So as soon as I knew that they wanted me, that anybody could have come in there, it wouldn't have mattered. You know, it was a no-brainer for me.
And given United's strong connection to Northern Ireland, you know, you would have seen Norman Whiteside, obviously Georgie Best, you know, and all of that. So was there any pressure, Keith, when you signed in, playing on the wing, Northern Irish? Did people start calling you the new Best at 14, or were they more normal with those things?
No, I mean, I think that is just something that happens to anybody from Northern Ireland who goes across the water to, you know, especially Man United. I mean, I think Norman Whiteside probably got it, and he's a totally different player to what George Best was. You know, obviously me being a winger as well, like George was, you know, they started making those comparisons, and that actually became my nickname in football. Now, a lot of people call me Bestie still to this day. But as I say, it's just one of those things that's always going to happen to any young kid coming from Northern Ireland and trying to carve out a career in the game. And as I say, mine was a little bit different because I was a winger as well, like George was.
Right. Okay. So Soha will go next. Yeah.
Regarding the class of '92.
Yeah. Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. So welcome. It's really nice to have you here. And my question to you was about your integration with class of '92. How did it feel like to be a part of the team back then? You were playing with Scholes and Neville, and did you imagine that class of 92 would achieve the heights that they did at that time? What was the experience like?
Yeah, I think when that sort of group of players, when we look back to that time, I think we were all very fortunate that we were all in one group, because you get age groups that year maybe, and sometimes you get 1-2 players that come through and sign professional forms. Out of the group that I was in, there was 8 of us, which is quite extraordinary. But I think we realised we were getting a lot of media attention at a very young age. The manager sort of obviously seen what he had coming through. And I remember we actually played the first team in a friendly once at the training ground. And you're talking Schmeichel and Cantona, Mark Hughes, Ince, Roy Keane, Parker, Bruce, Pallister, you know, amazing side. And we actually beat them at the training ground 4-2. You know, and this is the young side of Beckham, Scholes, Nicky Butt, Gary Neville, myself, Ben Thornley, John O'Kane, Chris Casper, who played in that team also. You know, so I think he knew that we had, you know, the potential to go on to things. I mean, obviously, when you look at what has happened and you look at the career that David Beckham has had, you know, obviously Giggs was in our youth team. Gary Neville spent his whole career at Man United. Scholesy, incredible. Nicky Butt, incredible career he had. So I don't think you maybe envisage that they'll go on to be as successful as they actually did. But you know, for you know, mainly when you look at Gary, Paul Scholes, you know, to spend their whole careers, Ryan Giggs, to spend their whole careers at the top level at a club like Man United is an incredible achievement, just being there that length of time, the trophies that they won. But I think when we first came through, we helped each other through. You know, one week one of us would be in with the first team, the next week it would be somebody else, and we all sort of pushed each other on to try and get further, you know, as far as we could, because a lot of us pretty much went from youth team and bypassed reserve team football. We played an occasional reserve team, but we pretty much bypassed the reserve team and went straight into the first team picture. So, you know, we were quite fortunate that we were all sort of together in that 1 year.
All right. Keith, since we're on the topic of the class of 92, I know it was very competitive and you all used to work off of each other's energy, but I'd like to ask about who were the jesters, who were the jokers from that group, who kept everybody entertained, who had the best, you know, what is your best memory from that time period amongst all of you having a good time playing football and, you know, jacking each other's legs and all of that?
Yeah, you know, Rob Savage was a part of that class in '92 as well. So he was pretty much a big joker. I actually used to share digs, you know, because the likes of Paul Scholes and Nicky Butt, Gary Neville were, you know, they were local lads. So when training finished, they went home to their families. You know, we lived together in a house, and I shared a room with Rob Savage, and unfortunately, he was very obsessed with his hair. So his hair dryer going off every morning was my actual alarm clock, you know, to wake me up. That's how bad it was. But you know, there was all sorts of you know, carrying on in the dressing room. As first year apprentices, you know, the second year apprentices are in charge and they make you do stupid initiations, and you know, there's times where people's been put in, you know, tracksuit bottoms, more tracksuit bottoms, tops, about 5 layers of tops, and they've got thrown into the sauna, and you're sweating, you're sweating so much, and you're trying to throw everything off, and that's the sort of stuff that you sort of get up to. But you know, these sort of things don't happen now. This was sort of just an initiation type thing, which happened at a lot of clubs. But I think as years went on, they sort of seen maybe that this is a sort of bullying. But you know, looking back, I never seen it like that, but I think maybe some people just complained about that it was maybe a little bit too much. So that sort of thing's gone from the game now.
So Keith, you made your debut for United in the FA Cup. You scored on your first game. At that time, you know, did the manager, when he gave you your debut, I think you were still 18, if I'm not wrong, still quite young.
17.
17. So at that time, yeah, and then later on, obviously, you went on loan to Wigan as well. So when you went on loan and that after that debut, did the boss have a plan for you that, yeah, Keith, you'll go out, you'll get some games, you know, we'll slowly ease you into the first team? Because if I'm not wrong, you were more a part of the first team picture at that time than Bex was, for example.
Yeah,
but when you made your debut.
Well, yeah. You know what happened with the debut? I'd been in the squad, you know, quite a bit at times, and you know the manager was great, and he wanted you to bring young players into the squad, not necessarily for them to get stripped on a Saturday, you know, but just to be in that environment and knowing what it was like to be part of the first team. So I had been in the first team squad, you know, a few times, and the particular time when I made my debut, I'd gone to it was a home game, and I'd gone to the ground, and you have pre-match meal at Old Trafford, and I remember there was a little bit of a doubt would Ryan Giggs be fit, and again I thought I was just in the squad for a little bit more experience again, and I remember I was sat opposite Paul Parker, and Alex Ferguson was walking past, and Paul Parker says to the manager, "Is Giggsy fit?" like that, and the manager turned around and went, "No," and he pointed at me and went, "Sure, he can play," and that was his way of telling me I was making the debut. And then obviously I went out. We won the game 2-0. I put the cross in. Mike Phelan scored the first goal, and then I scored the second one about 10 minutes to go. So it was just it was incredible sort of feeling. You know, very very surreal. In that, you know, when I look back on it, you know, 18 months previous to making my debut for Man United, I was still at school. You know, so I'd sort of made, you know, huge strides quite quickly. But, you know, you say obviously that I went out on loan. I played another game that season in the FA Cup. I came on as sub, and we won that game. And then he wanted me to go out on loan just to get that experience of playing, you know, men's football. You know, so I went to Wigan for a month, and then they wanted to keep me another month. And then they wanted to keep me another month, but Alex Ferguson thought after 2 months, you know, that he wanted me back. So then I started figuring more with the first team, and you know, David Beckham wasn't a right winger. You know, his position was centre midfield. So I had Andre Kanchelskis in front of me, which, you know, Andre was a sensational player, and especially in sort of 1994-95, he was incredible. So it was up to me to try and dislodge him, but you know, I did get a few games here and there. But as I say, Beckham was a little bit later than that. You know, he played a few games. My problem was that a lot of the lads who came through with me, they were involved in the European games, because at the time they had that ruling that if you were Welsh, Scottish, Irish, you were classed as a foreign player. Yeah. And you could only have 3 foreigners, you know. So when you've got the likes of Keane, Irwin, Schmeichel, Cantona, Hughes, McClare, you know, I've just rounded off 6 there straight away. So I knew then that, you know, that they obviously had a bit of fortune on their side there, because they were involved in all those games, and obviously I wasn't. But you know, I was just happy to be in and around the first team at that stage, and trying to push forward to try and play as many games as I could.
Did the boss discuss with you when the Newcastle thing came up? Because at that time, I know there was a lot of surprise for people, but Newcastle even agreed to sell Andy Cole. But obviously, Kevin Keegan liked what he saw, and Newcastle liked you. They felt that you would have still been quite young at the time. So they were getting an investment for £1 million is what your part of the deal was. So did the boss have a chat with you and say, I mean, did you have an option maybe not to go?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, what happened was it was just after the New Year. We were in January, and I'd played against Coventry in the Premier League. I think it was about the 3rd or 4th of January. We won 3-0 at home, and then the following week we were playing Sheffield United in the FA Cup, and I was going to the game thinking, you know, I've got a really good chance of playing again here. Andre was ill as well, so I turned up at the ground. The team was announced, the subs was announced, and I wasn't involved. So Alex Ferguson pulled me aside and said, "Look, I'm in for this. We're in for this striker at Newcastle. But the only way the deal is going to happen is if you go the other way." He says, have a think about it. Just watch the game, have a think about it, and I'll speak to you after the game. I obviously knew it was Andy Cole that he was after, and again, going back to that European ruling, they were desperate to get an English striker in, and Andy Cole was the best in the business at the time. So I remember I was actually sat watching the game, and I was sat beside Ben Thorney, who was in the squad that night as well, and didn't get changed. And I remember the manager had said to me, don't be saying to anyone about this, So I'm watching the game, and I've gone to the game thinking I'm going to play, and now within a 5-minute chat with the manager, I'm thinking of leaving the club. So I remember sort of sounding out Ben a little bit about Newcastle. I says, "What do you think of Newcastle as a club?" I just got the topic on to Newcastle, and he says, "Oh, great club," because we'd played against them in the Coca-Cola Cup or whatever it was called at that period. And I remember being up there, and the Geordie fans, I think everybody knows how passionate they are. So the game had finished, and I spoke to Steve Bruce, and I spoke to Brian Robson, I spoke to Brian McClare, and they said it was a great opportunity for me. There was no pressure put on me at all. If I had said no to it, the deal was off. But I just seen it as an opportunity. Then, I had to be selfish for myself, my career. Although I'm a Man United fan, you want to be playing regular first team football.
Yeah.
I was still 19, and I was going to a big club with a big name manager in Kevin Keegan, and I just seen it as a real challenge and a good move for me to go and get regular first team football and establish myself at a Premier League club. So that's pretty much how it happened. And the rest of we'd won the game 2-0, and the rest of the players jumped on the coach to head back to Manchester, and myself and Sir Alex jumped in a car and went to a hotel in Sheffield, where we met up with the chief executive, the chairman of Newcastle, Kevin Keegan, and it was myself and Sir Alex. So we got there, and this is before even mobile phones. We got there about midnight, and the manager says, get your mum on the phone. So rang my mum, explained the situation. The manager
because he was worried about her. He wrote in his book that he wanted her not to feel that he was sidelining her boy. He wrote that. Yes. He was very worried about what she felt.
Exactly, and that shows you what a man he was in doing that. So he came on the phone and explained the situation, and she said, "Look, if I was happy, she's happy." But at the time, I never had an agent, so she asked the manager, or the manager asked her, would it be okay if he acted as my agent and did the deal for me? So I was happy enough for that. So was she. So we actually went into a room, a round table, and he told me, he says, you don't have to say anything. I'll do all the negotiations. And at the time, the 8 of us that signed the pro contracts, Beckham, Scholes, Nicky Butt, Gary Neville, etc., we weren't on big money. The manager was a great believer in that. You needed to be an established player before you went into the big money. And at the time, we were on £250 a week. And I remember the manager sitting at the table, and I sort of had my head down, and he goes, "Well, Keith's on £600 a week at the minute. We want you to double it." And I sort of looked up, so I did, and he gave me a sort of look as if to say, "Don't you say a word here." And fortunately, Newcastle agreed to it straight away. So he told a few white lies in the meeting, but it was very advantageous for me in him doing that.
You scored against Newcastle at Old Trafford. Do you think that was something that they liked the looks of you, and they felt, okay, if we're getting rid of a scorer, at least we're bringing in someone who's a creator and a scorer?
Yeah, well, I played against. We actually played in pre-season, a tournament up at Ibrox in Glasgow, and Newcastle were in the tournament, and I played, and I had a really good game, and then I actually played in a testimonial game in Belfast for Billy Bingham, the ex-Northern Ireland manager, and it was against Newcastle. And again, I had a good game. I played in the Coca-Cola Cup or whatever it was called. We lost 2-0, but it was a really experienced Newcastle side, and we didn't score to maybe 10 minutes to go, and it was mainly the sort of kids who played. And then it was 3 days later where I come on a sub and scored against Newcastle. So I'd obviously left an impression. And I know from talking to Kevin Keegan and also Brian Kidd, Brian Kidd especially told me that walking down the line after the game, when the game had finished at Old Trafford, Kevin Keegan started asking questions about me, and that was back sort of end of October time. So I obviously didn't go until the January. There was no sort of transfer window then, but I didn't go to the January. But he had already asked the question there, and I know then, I know now that he actually made an inquiry for me at one stage, and Sir Alex Ferguson, totally rebuffed it. But then obviously when Alex Ferguson was looking Andy Cole, Kevin Keegan threw my name into it and said that that's the only way the deal's happening. If he doesn't get me, the deal is off. So it's nice that somebody who was an incredible player like Kevin Keegan wanted me that much to sacrifice somebody like Andy Cole because he had a sort of long-term vision, and he obviously proved that in terms of 6 months later when he brought in Les Ferdinand to replace him. So it was it was an exciting time for me. Still a very young lad at 19, but it was a chance for me to go and establish myself at a big club like Newcastle.
So Keith, you transferred to Newcastle in January, and then there were reports of you moving back to Old Trafford in the August of the same year. So what happened there?
Yeah, well, I left in sort of January '95. By the end of that season, Andrei Kanchelskis had left the club. So I remember sitting at home, and it was pre-season time, and I got back in again. No mobile phones at this stage, and there was a caller ID on my landline, my home phone, and it was 0161, and it had been ringing for a couple of days, and I sort of wouldn't answer any numbers that I didn't recognise, because you think that journalists get your numbers very easily, and so I wasn't answering it. And then one day it rang, I didn't answer it, and all of a sudden the answer machine clicked on, and the manager, Alex Ferguson, started speaking, and I quickly grabbed the phone, so I did, and he explained the situation, and he says he'd been chatting to Kiddo. They're obviously trying to replace Andre, and he says he hadn't even thought of me, and Kiddo says, "What about me?" And he was straight on the phone. So what happened was Alex Ferguson comes calling, "You're always going to go back." So he said, "Leave it with me. I'll speak to Kevin Keegan." But I never heard anything more from it. I know that they offered $4 million for me because Peter Beardsley was very close with Kevin Keegan, and he was with Gary Neville on an England trip, and I was able to tell Gary, and Gary reported that back to me. So that was how it happened then, because with me not being able to go, that's how David Beckham then transferred from being that centre midfielder to going to the right side of midfield, and it obviously worked out well for them in the end.
4 million, you said, that's actually big money back in those days. And I'm going to read out some fan questions from the page, and obviously everyone's very happy that you've come on, and everybody's thanking you for that as well.
No problem.
Okay, so Bilal Ahmed has asked that Gary Neville once said that the boss would drop you but manage it in such a way that you would never mind it. Any such memory for you?
Yeah, well, I remember actually making my debut for Man United, and obviously scoring that night. He's obviously talking to the press after the game. He says that he'll be back in the youth team on Saturday. So I went from scoring for Man United on a Tuesday night, and I'm back playing for the youth team on the Saturday. But obviously I'm still very young then. But I think being young lads, we knew that we were going to be coming in now and again. You have to really get a little bit more experience before you come that sort of regular. So yeah, I know exactly what Gary means. That you're not going to go knocking on Sir Alex Ferguson's door if you're not playing, because he doesn't get too much wrong. But I know exactly what Gary's alluding to. Yeah.
Okay, and Khwaja Hassan has asked that Keith, your favorite win in a United shirt and your most memorable defeat.
Favorite win was probably the Newcastle game. Obviously the debut means a lot, but it was the FA Cup, and no disrespect, it was against Bury, but obviously coming on and scoring my first Premier League goal against Newcastle. And it was, quite a good goal back then. So that would be the most memorable. The defeat that probably hurt the most was my actual Premier League debut. And we played Sheffield Wednesday away, and we lost 1-0. And I'd scored in the game as well, and I got given offside. And I had a really good game. And I remember I came off maybe about 15 minutes to go, and I remember in the changing room afterwards, Paul Ince asking me, "Was I injured? Why did I come off?" He thought I must have been injured, and I was like, "No." So that sort of showed how well I'd actually played. But I think being the sort of young guy, it's easier to take off the young player rather than an experienced player. So you just take that in the chin. But fortunately, in the games that I did play, I didn't play an awful lot of games, obviously. But fortunately, in the games that I did play, there wasn't too many defeats.
And even on the international stage, you've had quite a lot of good games. So which one was your best game internationally? You've been quite good in a lot of matches.
Yeah, I mean, I was very lucky. I had 86 caps for Northern Ireland over 14 years. So, quite thankful for that. But, back in 2005, we played England in Belfast, and we beat England. And the England side that night, you're talking Lampard, Gerrard, Beckham, Rooney, Owen. We beat them 1-0 that night, and just incredible for the likes of a little country like Northern Ireland. We've got 1.8 million people over here. And we shouldn't really be beating a team like England, especially when you mention the names of the players that played that night. But we beat them, and then nearly a year to the day following on that, we played Spain at home, and I was a Spanish team with David Villa and Puyol and Casillas, Iniesta, Xavi, Torres, and we beat them at home as well, 3-2. So this Spanish team, when we beat them, after we beat them, they never lost a game for 3 years. So it was just incredible 2 nights. It's a result that you wouldn't get too often, but it was incredible just to be a part of that, because the fans that we have are great, and as I say, we're a small nation, so there's times where we have a lot of sort of where we don't have players coming through the system, and it's very difficult. So for those 2 nights to beat England and beat Spain, nearly a year to the day with each game was just incredible to be a part of.
Okay, so obviously, Tayyab, you can go.
A lot of the class of '92 especially talk very highly of Sir Alex Ferguson, and you did so as well. So what has been so special about the bond that you've had with Sir Alex over the years, and how has it evolved and helped you with your careers?
Yeah, the manager was, he was a scary character. There's no doubt about that. So you always wanted to make sure that when you had played, you had given absolutely everything, because if you hadn't, you were getting it from him. So, it's nice sort of having that fear, but it's nice as well, when you are doing well and he puts an arm around you and tells you that, because all footballers need that at times. You need that when the manager puts his arm around you and gives you that confidence. That's why he's so successful. He wasn't a great coach, because he didn't coach the players. He had Brian Kidd to do that back in the early days, and later he had other people like Carlos Qureshi and Steve McLaren and others. So he knew how to get the best out of players on a Saturday. He knew exactly what to say in the dressing room and get the best out of those players, and he did it for years. And that's what made him the best manager around.
Okay, so one last fan question, actually. Lukman Baloch has asked that, have you ever been on the receiving end, or have you ever witnessed the famous Fergie hairdryer?
No, I mean, I've seen him lose his top a few times, but and I was never on the end. I was very close on one occasion, where I thought I was going to, and this was at a time when, as I said before, I was in and around the first team squad, and this particular weekend I wasn't in the squad, and I had some friends come over from Belfast, and I went out with them on the Friday night. I wasn't training Saturday, and I was just going to be going to the game on a Saturday. So I was in a hotel bar, and it was about 2:30 in the morning, and I just got a couple of bottles of beer, and I'd walk around to go and sit in these sofas, and sat in one of the sofas was Alex Ferguson, and as I came around and I sort of looked, I sort of had a double take, and he sort of looked and stared at me, and I don't even know why I did it. I sort of just turned and legged it. I just got out of there. So on the Saturday, I didn't see him because the game was on. We had Sunday off, and I got to the training ground on Monday, and I knew I would be getting called up to the office. And I was sat downstairs at the training ground at the Cliff, and Brian Kidd came downstairs, and he says, the manager wants to see you. So went up the stairs into the office. He said, sit down. And then the only thing he said to me then was 1 week's wages for telling the truth and 2 weeks' wages for lying. And I thought I was going to be getting this whole hairdryer treatment. And I said, look, boss, they weren't my drinks, they were my friends. And he says 2 weeks' wages. So that was me in trouble. But that was at a time where I thought I might get it. But you know, after that, I did get fined, obviously. But after that, there was no. He didn't hold it against me. I was a young lad, and I was just out with some friends, but it's not something that he liked his young players to be doing.
Or any of his players for that matter. It keeps coming up with the boss and the drinking culture. Keith, you go to Newcastle. Twice you end up as runners-up to Manchester United. The famous entertainers side, you're an integral part of it. You've played under Sir Alex Ferguson. You've grown up under him. You're playing for Kevin Keegan, like you said, great manager, great player, got a history. 12 points ahead, if I can ask. I know, okay, maybe Newcastle fans won't be so happy about this, but they have other problems right now. But 12 points ahead, it doesn't happen very often. Do you think it was a lack of experience? Do you think it was a lack of personnel? Or do you think that United, you always feared that United had the know-how of winning championships? How were they able to come back, and what do you think was the reason Newcastle lost that position?
Yeah, I mean that you can look at quite a few things. Obviously we had never been in that situation before. Out of the squad that we had at Newcastle, there was only Peter Beardsley, who had won a league before, obviously before the Premiership times. You can look and say about the run that Man United came on, because towards the end of that season, they just kept winning games, grinding games out 1-0. When games finished for us, you come in the changing room and you always ask what Man United score was, and for I don't know how many times it was like 1-0, can't it? The amount of sort of times that happened. I know in particular one game. This is when the gap had come down to 4 points. We played Man United at St James's, and we absolutely murdered them that game. Peter Schmeichel got man of the match, and Cantona scored at the back post with a sort of volley. And you sort of think, on a different day, we win that game, and the 4 points goes to 7 points. But now, because we lost it, the 4 points go to 1 point. And now the whole momentum is with Man United. People can talk about, we signed David Batty in March and we signed Tino Asprilla, and people, sort of try and contribute that to it as well, because the team that we sort of had in a front sort of six that we played, which the left, myself, right, it was Lee Clark and Rob Lee in centre midfield, and it was Beardsley and Ferdinand up front.
That's a good side.
Yeah, but that going forward, that six was most of the season, 90% of the season, and we got to the position of top of the league by playing that 4-4-2. We brought in Tino Asprilla, who's a fantastic player, but that meant then that he was playing with Les Ferdinand. So what happened was, me being the sort of youngest member of the side, I got dropped. Peter Beardsley moved to right wing. Peter Beardsley, fantastic player, but he's not a right winger. In terms of what we were doing, on the left, myself on the right, we were just getting down the line, getting balls in the box, and Les Ferdinand was getting on the end of them. So you were sort of thinking, well, you know, if it ain't broke, why try and fix it? That sort of thing. You know, and I remember Rob Lee going to the manager and saying to him to put me back in, and for a while he didn't, and then when I did finally get my chance to get back in the team, I scored the winner against Leeds, and that was the night where he was on Sky TV and totally, absolutely lost it, and I would love it if we beat you, and so forth. But you know, you can look at quite a few things. I know myself that Gary Lineker has always come out and said that the reason that he believes Newcastle lost the league was because I was dropped.
You were creating the most chances on average for the team.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, I was never really a skillful player. I was, you know, I dropped the shoulder and I had pace, and I could cross a ball. And when you've got somebody like Les Ferdinand in the box, he thrives on crosses. You know, so if you've got Ginola on one wing who wants to get crosses in, myself on the other, and we try and get as many crosses as we can. And Les Ferdinand was as good as anybody in the air, you know, and he was a big target to have in there. So going from what I said, being a sort of 4-4-2 with two out-and-out wingers, we changed that, you know, by bringing in Tino Asprilla and obviously Peter Beardsley moving to the right.
And then, of course, you talked about Asprilla. You had a great game with him. You set him up, you know, what would be a career highlight for you, the game against Barcelona. You know, for Newcastle, it's a big thing. You're playing the Champions League. You had that game. And then, of course, you also played up front once and got the goal as well. You said it was one of your best goals playing. And then, you know, from there on to go from Newcastle, you said you were part of Kevin Keegan's plans, but, you know, you still moved to Blackburn. You win. I know you missed the FA Cup. Was Keegan thinking because you'd been injured, but you were fit?
No. Kevin Keegan had left the club then. It was Kenny Dalglish was the manager.
Okay.
So 3 weeks before the final, I got injured at White Hart Lane, and at White Hart Lane they actually have an X-ray machine, so I got it X-rayed straight away. So there was nothing showing up. So I was trying to train, and I was in a lot of discomfort. And then 2 days before the cup final, I had a fitness test and I failed it. I was no way fit enough. And I knew myself that if I was fit, I would have played, because what he had to do then, he had to play Warren Barton, who was a right back. He had to play him at right wing. So I knew if I was fit, I would play, and that was a really disappointing you know, time for me. But you know, obviously, you know, the season where we qualified for the Champions League and we played the likes of Barcelona, and you know, you stand in the tunnel and all of a sudden you hear the Champions League music, and you're looking at the Barcelona side, and you're looking at Figo and Rivaldo and Luis Enrique and little player De La Pena, who's a fantastic little midfielder for them. You know, and we went out, and Asprilla obviously got the hat-trick. I was fortunate enough where it was just the game of my life. I just had the game of my life. And I think looking back, you know, when people go, what was the best game that you played in an individual, you know, basis? If somebody's going to pick a game where they want to have the game of their life, you're going to pick a Real Madrid, or you're going to pick a Barcelona. And for me, I was very lucky that night that was it. But going to Blackburn then, I was in the last year of my contract, and the club had offered me a new 4-year contract, and I turned it down. I wanted better terms. So what happened then, because it was the last year of my contract, Middlesbrough put in an offer and tried to sign me. They bid $3.5 million. So I went down and spoke to Middlesbrough, and I came back. And this is after the season of the cup final. I'd gone down and I was training, but I was still having this problem, you know, from the injury. So I went down and spoke to Middlesbrough, and then I'd done a medical. So I got back home, and then I got a phone call that night from Brian Robson, who was a manager at Middlesbrough, to say that there was a broken bone in my foot. So I'd had this broken bone in my foot from the May, and you know, we're talking the end of July here, and it's a really bad bone to break, your talus bone, and you know, it can be quite a serious one. Very little blood supply to that part of the body. So I came back, and this is a time as well where everything wasn't right at Newcastle. The directors and everyone had tried to sell me behind Kenny Dalglish's back. He had no knowledge whatsoever that I was going to Middlesbrough, so I had to phone Kenny and tell him that bad news. I've failed the medical, and he says, that's not bad news for me. You're still in my plans, and he was great with that. But obviously, I was coming back and I was injured. Newcastle then seen this as an opportunity, and they were, a little bit sneaky with some of the stuff they were doing. And one of the directors put out in the newspaper that my career was in doubt and I might never play again. And from that 4-year contract, they offered me a new 1-year contract, which wasn't nice on their part. So I had spoke to all the specialists and everything who had told me, look, it will heal, it'll be no problem. So Kenny had left the club not long after, and then you've got Ruud Hullet come in, and I was still injured when he came in, but I was getting back to fitness, and I forced my way into the side, and I played 4 games on the trot. But I was 6 months from going for a Bosman then. So the club realised then that they needed to cash in. So Brian Kidd had just taken over at Blackburn, and I turned out to be his first signing at Blackburn. That we were bottom of the league to try and keep us in the Premiership.
Yeah, but you won the League Cup though at Blackburn. Sorry, Ismaeel, I'm just going on.
Yes. The first season we got relegated. When I arrived at the club at Christmas, we were bottom. We ended up finishing third bottom, and it was actually Man United who drew with us at Ewood Park that night, 0 each, and sent us down. So it was disappointing. And then it took us 2 years to get back to get promoted again back to the Premiership with Graham Souness then as manager. And I think in our first year back in the Premiership, we came 6th and we won the Worthington Cup. So all that disappointment and missing the FA Cup final, was made up for me then. Playing in the final at the Millennium Stadium that day, and it was just incredible. It's a horrible place to be, a cup final when you lose. So I obviously was part of the squad that day when we lost the cup final to Arsenal when I was injured, and it's just all doom and gloom. So it was nice to have that happy day where we beat Spurs in the final back in 2002 or 2003.
2002, yeah.
2002.
And then you had Leicester, and then obviously at Sheffield United, helping them back to the Premier League. What was that like? Someone who's played at the highest level, then you're dropping down a division. You're obviously a more experienced pro now, and then you're helping a sort of like, I think it's fair at the time to call Sheffield United a yo-yo club, because
Yes.
they would go between the divisions. So as a more experienced player and someone who's regularly playing for Northern Ireland at the time, what was that like for you at that stage of your career to be in a team that was looking for promotion, and then you helped them to get promotion?
Yeah, well, I mean, after Blackburn, and I spent 4.5 years at Blackburn. I went to Leicester, and who had just got promoted to the Premiership, but unfortunately we got relegated, straight away. So I had a season there at Leicester in the Championship, and we changed our manager about September. Mickey Adams left the club, and Craig Levine came in, and he liked me straight away, and I played regularly. And I ended up, I'd only signed a 2-year contract with Leicester at that time, but I got the supporters player of the year. So you think then that, the fact that you've had a good season, there'll be a contract on the table, but financially Leicester were not in a good place, so they weren't able to offer me a contract. So it was a case of then trying to get a club. And I went to Leeds. It looked like maybe they were going to sign me, but then Kevin Blackwell, I don't have too many good things to say about him. He was a manager there and never spoke to me the whole time I was there. And then Craig Short, who I played with at Blackburn, had gone to Sheffield United, who obviously knew me and knew my character, and was very, very close with Neil Warnock. And he told Neil Warnock to sign me. So I signed for Sheffield United and helped them back to the Premiership, and had the sort of last laugh over Leeds, because we came second, Leeds came third, and lost in the playoff final. So I had the sort of the last laugh, but it was a great season. It was Neil Warnock was a fantastic person to work under. You know, he just knew how to look after, you know, players. On everybody needs treated differently, and you know, even at the time when I was playing at Sheffield United my first year, I lived up in the northeast, and you know, it's a couple of hours to get to training every day driving, and there'd be occasional days and sites. You know, you always had a Wednesday off, but you train on a Monday, come in Tuesday, have Wednesday off. But occasionally on a Monday, he would say to me, "See you Thursday." You know, and just knew how to look after his senior players. You know, and I loved working under him, and it was so unfortunate, you know, when we got back to the Premiership that we actually got relegated, you know, on the last day of the season, because I think we needed a point, and even if we didn't get a point, if Man United beat West Ham at home, you know, we'd stayed up, and lo and behold, we lost to Wigan after, you know, totally battering them the whole second half, hitting the post, hitting the cross, everything, just ball wouldn't go in. And then obviously Tevez got the winner at Old Trafford, and you know, we couldn't believe it. We were down, and that was Neil Warnock then left the club. So it was a great time. I really enjoyed that period, you know, of the promotion season and then being back in the Premier League.
Okay, so Keith, if we move on to our current squad and the current state of affairs, Soha has a question.
Yeah, so my question is about Daniel James, as you also once a young player. What do you think about Daniel James and the current squad at Manchester United? How can he benefit us at the moment? Because as you also said at the beginning of this interview, things have been a bit shaky since Alex Ferguson left. So what do you think about Daniel James?
It was a wee bit echoey there, but I know you were sort of talking about Daniel James.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think, you know, the beginning of the season, you know, I thought he started the season really well, but sometimes, you know, he's obviously got so much pace, but sometimes I think he's too quick with it at times, because he gets into these positions, and I just don't think that at this period in time, you know, certainly the second half of the season, his final delivery, you know, was as good as it should be, and it's probably something that he needs to work on, because I think we all know that he's got ability. You know, Ryan Giggs obviously talks very highly, you know, of him. You know, I haven't worked with him for Wales. You know, so I think you've got to just take into account that he is still very young, and you know, it can be very daunting for, you know, a player like him coming from, you know, no disrespect to Swansea, they're not a Man United. You come into a big club like Man United, and it's just wow. You know, it does take, you know, some players different lengths of time to get accustomed to being at a big club like that. So, you know, as I say, he did start the season very well, scored, you know, some good goals, but I think then he sort of just went off the ball and off the boil a bit. And I think that's just normal where it can happen to young players, where, you know, they're not going to be sensational every week. But I think it's important that the manager, you know, looks after him in that way, where he puts the arm around him and gives him that confidence, because they obviously know that there's a really good player there, because they wouldn't have gone out and spent, you know, the amount of money they did on him if they didn't think that.
Keith, if I can ask something a little closer to home, at your time and you know, throughout history, United have always had a strong British base, British and Irish base, with yourself and Ryan Giggs, and you know, Lou obviously being from Scotland, Brian McClare. Now we're seeing that United have players who play for those countries, but with the greatest respect to them, Scott McTominay and Daniel James are both English lads playing for other countries. Why are we not seeing more players since the Evans brothers or you know, Ollie Norwood? We're not seeing more young players from Northern Ireland come through. We're hardly getting any players from the Republic of Ireland, whereas once we'd have, you know, John O'Shea. From Scotland, we'd have Darren Fletcher. Is the level going down in those places, as some people say, or is it that more clubs are scouting and thus the better talent is going away different, because populations have increased, the exposure to football has increased? You'd imagine they would be more a larger pool to choose from.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think certainly when I was coming through, you know, everyone was from the UK. When you look at youth teams now, you know, you look at sort of clubs like Arsenal, how many Spanish they have, how many French. There's a real influx of younger European players coming at the age of 16 now, where you didn't have that back then. So it is more difficult when you're fighting. You're not just up against the UK players. You're up against pretty much the whole of Europe and even beyond. If you look back and you think that Rafael and his brother Fabio, they're Brazilians. So you're up against South Americans sometimes. But I know that there's a good young player coming through at United who played. He's from Northern Ireland. He played in the Europa League. He came on in the last couple of minutes. Ethan Galbraith.
Yeah, Galbraith.
He made his first team debut this season. He did the same. He made his full international debut in a friendly. Came on and got a couple of minutes, and he is just exceptional. He could go a long, long way in the game. His technique, everything, he is absolutely fantastic. So there's very, very high hopes in terms of him coming through, and everyone is well aware of him here in Northern Ireland. They're very much talking about, hopefully he's the next big thing to come through at Man United.
Brilliant.
Hopefully, because there's also Paddy McNair as well, who started really well at United, and then he went to Sunderland, and then this season he was heavily rumored to move back to the Premier League under Brighton, but the move didn't materialize in Sunderland. I think a Championship club wanted more money for him, so that's why it didn't come through. But obviously, Paddy McNair was really good for us in the time that he was here.
Yes, Paddy's a fantastic player. I would see a lot of Paddy now playing for Northern Ireland, and he's such a hard worker. He's one of those players who can play anywhere really. He can play centre midfield. He can play right back. You could throw him in at centre half. He's a player that all sort of squads need, that he can fill in no matter what, and he's got a great engine, and he's done very well for Northern Ireland over the last sort of 4 or 5 years. He's a very, very important player for us, and I think when we seen him coming through at Man United, we thought that he was going to be sort of at Man United for a lot of years to come, but unfortunately that doesn't always happen. You look at Johnny Evans as well, who in my eyes was a big mistake getting rid of Johnny, because Johnny, you see what Johnny does week in, week out. I'd see him playing a lot for Northern Ireland, obviously. He's an exceptional player, and certainly I'm not sure why they got rid of him when he did, because there was obviously talk when he was at West Brom that Man City wanted to buy him, Arsenal wanted to buy him. So he was obviously still a great player, and he still is. He's a fantastic player. He's had a really good season at Leicester.
Obviously, I saw the Euros as well, and Northern Ireland had a really good team. Oliver Norwood was a part of it. Johnny Evans, as you said, his brother Corey Evans, and there are a lot of really good prospects. So Keith, towards the end of the show, we have to ask you something. How close are you to any United ex-player or current player?
We play in quite a lot of sort of ex-players games. I'm on a group chat with quite a few of them, and there's Maisie's on it, Ben's on it. You get Russell Beardsmore, Lee Martin, Daniel Graham, who would remember back, played in the late sort of 80s, early 90s for the club. Andy Ritchie. There's a few others. They'll have to forgive me that I can't remember off the top of my head. So we play in a lot of games. That's arranged. It's good that we can see each other again. We've been out in the Far East playing sort of ex United as well at times. So it's great that we can sort of still see each other. And it's great, we have the WhatsApp group where we're chatting quite a bit here and there, and it's, as I say, they're all good lads. It's important, I suppose, because when you finish football, you can lose those sort of friendships at times, because you're coming into the training ground, you're seeing players every day, and then all of a sudden you're not, and it's nice where you can have that connection still with the ex-players.
Okay, so who are you going to invite on our show?
Gosh, I must. Well, I know it was Ben who spoke to me.
Yes, we asked him for you.
I wonder, you know, would Russell do it, or Lee Martin or somebody?
Lee would be great. You know,
Yep.
he saved the boss's job. So
he did, and again, he's a great lad. He's a really good lad. You'd really
doing well as a
his.
manager.
You what? Sorry.
He's doing well as a manager as well. He's doing okay. Wasn't Lee managing Lee Martin? No.
No,
okay,
not that I know of.
Okay.
Not that I know of. You maybe know something I don't.
Are you going to ask him for us and hopefully bring him on?
Yes,
we'll
hopefully,
obviously be honored
so.
because he has a strong history with Manchester United as well.
Yes,
so it will be great to hear from him.
I'll send him a message, and hopefully he'll come on it. And I'll send him a message. And I'll get Ben to follow him up as well. You know, so he's got it from both sides. But he's a good lad. He's a really good lad.
Yeah, so if there's anything that we have to do to bring him on, then please let me know, and obviously if I have to email or anything, then I'll do that as well.
Yes, no bother. I'll send him a message when I'm done here, and hopefully he'll get back to me. He's not very good at replying to the messages. It takes him a day or two. That's one thing. Because on the group chat, he's one person that, you know, because we put all the funny videos and all up at times, and he's one that doesn't put anything up. He probably just looks at it. He's like the silent assassin.
Okay, that's great. So, Keith, it was a real pleasure to talk to you and obviously learn about United and your time at United. And we heard a lot of great stories as well. And I'm sure Hassan is very delighted. He's been asking me for months that I should somehow get Keith Gillespie on the show. And finally, he has his dream here.
No problem whatsoever. Anytime.
No, it's an honor, Keith. You know, watching you come through the class of '92, playing for that first Premier League winning side. For an older fan like myself, you know, we saw you guys come through at that time. You're heroes to us. It means the world that you took the time out today. And we said this to Maisie, we said it to Ben. We'll tell you when things are better, please come visit us in Pakistan. We'd love to have you guys. We'd love to have you guys out here. We'll feed you proper good food for a change. And it would just be great for the fans. And I know for all four of us and all those watching on the Facebook live stream today as well, it's been such a pleasure to speak to you, to learn from you, to hear from you. It's just been surreal. Thank you so much.
No, I really appreciate you having me on. And as I say, anytime, no problem at all.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Take care of yourself and your family.
No problem.
Thank you so much.
Thanks again. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Have a good day. Bye.